All right, guys, it is Mr. Gallion again. Probably just saw me a second ago in the other video, so let's dive in and do this second part. I think this is fascinating stuff, especially in light of where we are right now. So in the post-war era, we have a number of things that are going to start to change society. It's around this time that we discover penicillin. A guy in a lab is working on researching some bacteria, and he's gone for the weekend, and his bacteria, his samples are a little bit tainted. A fungus starts to grow. And he comes back and he realizes, oh no, there's just fungus here. And then he's like, wait, there's just fungus here. Like the bacteria I was researching is gone. Maybe we can use that to treat some of these bacteria that get in people, and we can use it as a treatment. And sure enough, it happens. This sparks research into all kinds of things, lots of antibiotics and drugs that just weren't available prior to this time. Like in the early 1900s, you can't just get like strep throat and go get, amoxicillin and be better in 2 or 3 days. It takes a little longer than that because we didn't have the same treatments. That's fascinating. And because of that, it changes the way we look at medicine so that we start developing drugs much more quickly. They even develop a vaccine for things like polio. Guys, polio used to be an awful, awful thing, right? Most of you know that Franklin Roosevelt was stricken with penicillin when he was very young, and because of that, he couldn't walk. There are other people who ended up in what they call an iron lung. It's like this, think of it almost like it's almost like a coffin kind of a thing, but your head sticks out of it, and it forces your lungs down by compressing this air, and then it pulls the air out so your lungs can contract. And people would have to live in these iron lungs for the rest of their lives because polio had basically crippled them. And now we can give you a vaccine. We jab you with it once when you're a kid and you never get polio. And you probably don't know anybody today who has polio because it's basically gone. Sorry, who's ever had polio, not who has it now, because they don't. But it's basically gone, which is amazing. These vaccinations are amazing, amazing things. And we've gotten so good at it. It used to take years and years to develop them. And now the idea that we're even talking about 12 to 18 months for a coronavirus vaccine, that might sound like forever to you. And yeah, I get it. Like I want it today, right? But that's incredibly short. Even a decade ago, it would take years and years to develop these things, but we've gotten much, much, much better. Okay. We've got to do research, want to make sure that they're safe. I know there's debate about that. Frankly, I don't think there should be. That's a whole other conversation. During the war, we come up with these surgical advancements that allow people to live through things they might have died from before. And actually, we're able to, in the post-war period, get to the point where we can actually do a heart transplant. We can take the heart out of somebody who's just died. We can put it in somebody whose heart is bad. And we're like, wait a minute, maybe we can do this with all kinds of things. And so this is, y'all, you're living in a miracle era. Even though, yes, there's a pandemic on, it is so much better now. In fact, one of the pieces of data that I have here, there are a couple results. Look at this. The infant mortality rate falls. Back in 1950, out of, well, this is not 100. It's usually taken out of 1,000. You'd have almost 30 infants who would die before their first birthday. And by 2004 or 2005, when this chart ends, I know I need a new one. Sorry about that. That's way down to like 7. That's significant. Not only that, but your life expectancy increases. So 1900, you've got 47.3 is your average life expectancy. Now, part of that's because so many kids were dying in childbirth. Yeah, you had people live, to be 70, 80, 90, 100. That was true, but it was much less common. By about a decade ago, your average life expectancy is 78.2, okay? That's because of all these immunizations, because of all these treatments, and this is a miracle. Now, I do want to point this out. I think this is really significant for where we are today. Look at this dip. In 1918, you've got this huge dip in life expectancy, and that is because the influenza virus hits, and it hits the very young, it hits the very old, and it even hit a lot of people in middle age. Now, the coronavirus right now is a little bit different. Doesn't hit very young people hard at all. I mean, you can still get sick, but it's killing them in very, very, very small numbers. Old people still have the highest mortality rate with this thing, but even people in my age group, it's nowhere near as high as it is for older folks at all. Now, the influenza pandemic wasn't like that. people in my age group were dying left and right. Okay. So as bad as this thing might be and might get, it's not the influenza pandemic of 1918, partly because we have better medical advances. And let's be honest, when we get that immunization in a year to year and a half, it's going to help things significantly. And yeah, finally, I know whoever put this chart together spelled birth wrong. Sorry about that. Now, think about this. All of a sudden, we have old people who are living a lot longer than they used to. That's going to bring about a huge change in society. Okay, more people are alive for longer periods of time. Number one, they're living through childhood, so we got to have more schools, more churches, more stores, more factories, more places for them to work. There's more demand. And these old people vote, okay? So you're going to get politicians who are going to go for these older folks and say, hey, let's take care of you. Let's give you what you want. Is it you don't want your Social Security benefits cut? Cool, let's do that. Is it that, I mean, whatever, all kinds of, think about things that older folks need or want. Of course, on top of that, we need more food during the war and after the war because of all this boom. And so science is starting to come up with ways to make food production easier. And yes, there are debates today about should we have genetically modified foods or whatnot, but the reality is that without genetically modified foods, we'd have a hard time providing for everybody we need. We can have bigger foods. We can make our food more durable against different diseases or different insects, and that's because of the fact that we have all these scientific advances. We use pesticides and fertilizers to have more crops that are grown. And yeah, not all the pesticides are good. Some of these things you don't really want to be ingesting, but it allows us to provide more food. And we have gotten better about regulating those, I should say. The nation's nutrition gets better because we're eating food, all the food we need more regularly. Because of that, people are healthy and they live longer. Now, the problem with all this is that some of these family farms that are doing things the old way can't compete. And so you might think about a barn like this picture right here, or sorry, a farm like this picture right here. But in reality, a lot of them today, the ones that provide our food, are these huge corporate farms. And yeah, there's some disturbing things that come out of there. Okay, we're not just always taking really good care of these animals right up until the point where they have to be butchered. It's kind of a sad thing, but how do you provide for food for the millions of people that we have in the United States? It becomes a real problem. Because of these concerns, there is a lot of legislation that starts to roll out in the 1970s. And there's also a debate on top of this about global warming. What kind of things are we putting out there into the environment? I know that is a debate that continues today. But that really comes about in part because, hey, we have these scientific advances that allow us to do these new things, both in farms and in business. Is that all good for the environment? Is it all good for us as individuals? There are all kinds of other things that we start to develop after the war. Our knowledge just kind of explodes. We start making jet engines and radar so we can tell if jets are showing up. Microwaves, computers, synthetic rubber, the hydrogen bomb. Y'all, it is still shocking to me. When I was growing up in the 80s, I got my first computer when I was 6, and people thought that I was a huge nerd, which, I mean, sure, they were right. But y'all, today, you all have probably at least one computer at home. And if you don't have a physical like laptop or desktop, you probably have an iPad or an iPhone or something that is, I mean, it was unthinkable. People used to make fun of me because I had a computer at home and I go spend time on it. And you guys are like, yeah, I'm on my phone all day. Okay, cool. So what about for women? Is it going to change? Is the post-war period going to change life for women? And the answer is, yeah. First of all, during the war, there are lots of new job opportunities, which we've talked about. But then when these soldiers come home, they want their jobs back. And so they displace a lot of these women who had jobs. When you turn on the TV from the 1950s, if any of you have seen some of those older shows like I Love Lucy, maybe, there's this idea that the woman has to be your traditional homemaker. She stays home and she takes care of the kids and that kind of a thing. So a lot of women go back to being stay-at-home wives and stay-at-home mothers. However, there's this increased demand for, hey, we need more money so we can buy some of these new things that are showing up. They make life better. So maybe, could you go back to work, honey? A lot of women want to go back to work because they're like, man, life was pretty good. I was working in a factory, I was making money, and now I'm back and I'm cooking and I'm cleaning and I'm taking care of the kids. It's not really what I want to do, okay? I want to go back and have more opportunities. So in the post-war period, this is the 1950s specifically, 40% of women were working outside of the home, and many of them were working in jobs that were considered feminine, like teaching. And I know I hate that, but it's a stereotype. Okay, it's true. Nursing, social work, retail sales. These are all things that women were doing. Not very many women back then were getting promoted to managerial positions, and still in the 1950s, women earned less than men when they did have the same jobs as men. This is very frustrating for a lot of women because they've gone to college now. Remember, it's acceptable for women to go to college, but they're not getting the jobs or the pay that match their ability level. And this is going to be a problem. So that's the best picture I could come up with to show that she's very frustrated and disappointed with life. So there's a book that's going to come out in the 1960s called The Feminine Mystique. This book is written by a woman named Betty Friedan. And this is Betty Friedan here in the front. She's the one who wrote the book. The idea of the feminine mystique is like this aura around something. And so she says there's this aura around women that they're supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to stay home and they're cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids. But yet, when the husband comes home at 5 p.m, the woman's wearing her beautiful dress, she's wearing her pearls, her hair is perfect, and dinner's on the table. And what she argues in here is that is an unrealistic expectation. Okay, women should be able to. I mean, if number one, if you want to stay home, cool, stay home. But that's a crazy expectation. If you're taking care of the kids and you're doing all that stuff, you're lucky to get your hair in a I don't know, what are those? I don't know, one of those band things. And look, that's reality. My wife, a lot of times when she was stuck at home, she's working now, she had come home and man, she's wearing the flannel pants and the t-shirt and she's got a little bit of vomit over here, and that's no slam on her at all. That's great. She was doing what she needed to do. But on the other hand, Betty Friedan says, if you don't like that, if you don't want to do that, you should be able to go to work. You should be able to do what you want to do. And that's going to start to change the way that society looks at women and their proper role. Now, what I'm going to do, I know this is a long section and I apologize for that. We've got a couple long sections left. I'm trying to be very careful about how much time I give you per week. So the only thing I'm going to do with this assignment after you watch the videos is that I'm going to give you a Google form checkup like I did before to do. Okay. There's more work that's going to come on Thursday, like I told you, but I really don't want to overwhelm you. And maybe you guys would say, hey, actually, this is really easy. I'm not having a problem with this at all. And it's great. It's really good. But I really am trying to have pity on you all. I'm continually revising my plans. So hang in there and we'll see what comes. All right. As always, I hope you guys are doing really well. I miss you and hope to see you again before the end of the school year. All right. Okay. Stay home, stay healthy. See you soon. I just started it again. Bye for real.